de Le Murto.
Oui, il a sorti.
Il est très gentil. Vous l'avez reçu la litote, non?
Non.
Ouais, moi je la reçois à l'école. Ça va.
Laquelle école?
Moi je suis à l'école internationale. Ça va, ça.
Ah d'accord.
Comme moi alors. On est
J'ai
les globetrotters du monde, avec l'accent, avec on parle français.
Washington.
Moi je suis né en Algérie,
Et vous êtes allé en France?
un petit peu, et après je fais le tour du monde.
Vous avez fait le tour du monde avant.
Ouais.
Mais justement, j'ai interviewé quelqu'un.
J'ai enseigné dans tous les pays du monde.
Vous avez rencontré Joseph Capey, il fait le tour du monde en bicyclette.
Ah non, moi je fais le tour du monde en enseignant.
Ah, vous êtes enseignant.
Ouais, et je peins. Et avec cet argent, je m'achète des tableaux, je fais des.
Vous faites des peintures avec l'argent.
Je fais des peintures. Regardez, il y a le blues, les femmes, le Maroc, les Indiens. J'ai vécu en. J'ai fait les Andes, le Guatemala,
Ah oui.
l'Amazonie. Donc j'ai peint. En fait, je
Donc
peins.
là, vous allez enseigner.
Là, j'enseigne. Là.
Ah, d'accord, d'accord. Vous enseignez l'art?
Non, non. Je
Le
fais
français.
du genre des cours d'art, oui, mais je ne enseigne pas l'art.
La philosophie, non?
Non, non, j'enseigne à des petits gosses, je fais français, maths,
Un peu tout.
théâtre. Ah non, ça c'est...
Mais
Non, non,
les
couleurs,
joyeuses.
les couleurs, ce sont des couleurs de pays
Ah
qui
bon.
vivent. Ce sont des pays africains, asiatiques, c'est ça les couleurs.
Ah bon?
Oui, mais quand on dit pas, non. Il n'y a pas de couleur adulte, des couleurs roses.
Si, quand les couleurs sont beaucoup plus près de...
Non, c'est l'état d'âme du peintre qui est comme ça.
Ah bon?
Mais bien sûr, les couleurs, c'est l'état d'âme. Lui, il retranscrit ce qu'il voit dans un pays où il est sans avoir ressenti le pays.
Non mais écoutez, une couleur comme ça, c'est beaucoup plus adulte, je trouve.
Non, il n'y a pas de couleur adulte.
Vous pensez pas?
Non, je ne suis pas d'accord. Il a
Mais elles sont beaucoup plus près de la nature, c'est ça ce que j'essaie de dire.
lesquels?
Les couleurs qu'il utilise, hein.
Qui?
Celui qui est à côté de vous là.
Non, quelle nature. On a le droit de faire des personnages verts ou jaunes si on veut.
Non, mon biais c'est tout simplement votre style, c'est tout.
Non, non, d'accord, ouais, non, je sais, mais. Non, je veux dire que c'est pas une couleur d'adulte. C'est une question de.
En tout cas, c'est des couleurs un peu plus joyeuses les vôtres.
Ah, parce que je voyage dans les pays et je retranscris ce que je vois.
Ah d'accord.
Ah, c'est une question d'état d'âme. Parce qu'il m'est arrivé de faire des trucs complètement. Pas sinistres, mais vraiment, des fois, on se demande vraiment qui.
Ah bon d'accord.
Ouais, c'est ça.
Vous vous appelez comment?
Beneteau. Beneteau.
Beneteau, ok.
Il y a le nom derrière là.
Ah, il y a le nom, ok.
J'en prenais une pour vous. Un petit mot dessus.
Ok.
Bernard Emmanuel Beneteau.
Et Bernard n'est pas là aujourd'hui?
Bernard Emmanuel Beneteau.
Ah, c'est vous
C'est moi.
Bernard aussi?
Et Bernard Renaud, c'est lui.
Et celui que je filme là, c'est qui?
C'est Renaud.
Renaud? Ah, c'est lui qui a fait?
Ouais.
C'est pas vrai. Bon.
Et ça, vous voyez, voilà, par exemple, là, vous avez deux sortes de vin. Voilà, ça dépend ce que vous voulez obtenir, là. Ça, c'est un gloss médium varnish. Et brillant. Celui-là, il va vous faire une finition plus mate. Et si vous voulez une finition intermédiaire, vous pouvez très bien mélanger les deux intermédiaires. Ouais. Plus vous allez vers celui-là, plus vous allez avoir du mat. Plus vous allez là, plus vous allez avoir du brillant. Mais dans l'état de cette toile, c'est pas définitif, ça va tout se transformer en une œuvre. Ouais. En vernis. Pas comme les naturalistes, il faut tout le temps.
reste des peintures, c'est pas vous?
Non, il y a plusieurs artistes.
Ah, il y a plusieurs.
Oui, jusqu'à là. Après, c'est notre. Ça, c'est encore moi. Ça, c'est une. Comment on dit, une peintresse?
Une peintre.
Une peintre. Alors, c'est une peintre de Mougins, dans le sud de la France,
Ah, d'accord.
qui a son propre atelier.
Et elle peint ici à San Francisco?
Non, elle nous les a envoyés.
Ah, elle les a envoyés,
Ouais.
après.
C'est très tard, elle a fait un atelier.
Par contre, ça, c'est vous.
Ouais.
Oui, on peut voir les différences de style de toute façon.
Ça, c'est un paysage de côté de Marseille.
Ah bon?
Galant de classe 6.
Vous l'avez fait en France alors?
Non, je l'ai fait peut-être
Par imagination?
2 ans après être là. J'avais
Un souvenir?
voilà. J'avais beaucoup traîné là-bas en bateau.
Hmm. Ça change, hein, les thèmes. Ça va des paysages à la guerre, à Charlie Chaplin.
Là, il est récent.
Il est récent
Deux
celui-là?
mois.
Ah ouais, super, c'est une bonne idée.
Ouais. Ah, en fait, c'est un résumé de sa vie.
Ah ouais.
Partout, puis un beau jour, elle dit allez, au revoir.
Il a quand même eu 9 enfants, hein.
Ouais.
Il fallait dessiner des enfants autour de lui.
Ça, c'est la prochaine fois. Ça, c'est un autre peintre.
Ça, c'est un autre, oui, ça
Ça
se voit.
s'appelle Momola, et lui, il habite à Marina Baie des Anges.
Ah bon?
Il est venu ici 2-3 jours, là,
Mhm.
à partir du 2, là.
Ouais.
Alors, lui, il peint beaucoup aussi.
Il aime beaucoup aussi la musique, on dirait.
Alors, c'est amené avec un deuxième Don Quichotte,
Hmm.
sans se concerter.
C'est beau comme couleur. En fait, chacun a son style, hein. On peut voir qui a fait quoi. Enfin, on peut voir qu'il y a un changement de
Ouais.
style. Ah bon?
Ouais.
Parce que j'ai vu une peinture similaire à la galerie Axis Gallerie. Vous avez entendu parler sur Sutter Street?
C'est à San Francisco.
Ouais. Et il a une galerie à Paris, aussi au Japon. Et je ne sais pas si c'est le même peintre justement, mais c'était avec des saxophones. Alors
Et
peut-être
lui,
que
il
c'est
a
un dessin vaut
ouais,
mille
des fois, ça
discours.
permet de s'expliquer les dessins. Hein.
Un dessin, ça vaut plus que 1000 discours.
Moi, je fais du dessin pour l'architecture, pour des cheminées, des choses comme ça.
Ah oui, pour mettre en haut des cheminées.
Et comme mon anglais est un peu juste,
Ouais.
je prends un bout de papier avec les gens. En 5 minutes, on voit où on est. Hein.
Ah, ils disent ce qu'ils veulent.
Ouais, par des croquis, des choses comme ça.
Ah d'accord. Et vous comprenez un peu l'anglais quand même?
Oui. Donc il faut comprendre. Pas toujours. Je devrais parler mieux que ça. Tout le monde me dit ça. Parce que ça fait 10 ans que je suis là, mais c'est pas mon truc. Les gens qui sont là depuis 1 an, qui parlent anglais.
Ah oui, oui, oui.
Oh, ça c'est pour moi alors c'est.
Mais il faut lire le Chronicle, le journal. Moi j'ai appris avec le journal et la télévision.
Ah bon.
J'ai appris l'anglais avec le journal et la télévision.
Je connais un autre,
Ah ouais.
un autre artiste,
Oui, c'est comme ça qu'il faut.
un sculpteur, il me dit moi,
j'ai vécu avec
je regarde la télé tous les soirs.
J'ai appris comme ça.
Et bon, bah, alors comme je suis trop télé, moi non plus.
D'abord vous faites un fond de base, c'est ça?
Oui, que je transforme petit à petit, un petit peu. Enfin, en fait, une couleur appelle l'autre. Hein.
Ah d'accord. Et puis vous faites un sketch au pinceau d'abord, au stylo?
Oui, au début, après j'en refais d'autres par-dessus. Il y a des choses que je suis en train de voir là, qu'il va falloir que
Ouais.
je transforme.
On dirait qu'il y aura une personne là,
Ouais,
une femme.
ça va apparaître.
Et ça c'est dans votre tête, ça vient pas à partir d'une photo.
Pas tellement, non, c'est un endroit que je connais bien aussi, ça c'est Toulonnaise d'origine.
tête, vous allez faire
Ouais,
ça de tête. Hein.
Ouais, c'est un des
Vous mettez
plus
pas
beaux
une
marchés
photo
du
devant
monde.
vous, vous mettez-
Et tous les jours.
Ah,
Du lundi au lundi. C'est tous les jours, tous les jours. Il y a un monde, surtout l'été, c'est incroyable.
oh.
Ouais.
C'est joli les arbres. Attends. On dirait il n'y en a pas. Je croyais que vous étiez en train de... Ah,
Il y a beaucoup de marchés comme ça en Provence. Il y a Toulon, Martigues,
mhm.
qui durent toute la semaine. Tous les jours, tous les jours, tous les jours.
J'ai vu le marché de Nice, moi. C'est-
Oui, ça aussi c'est beau.
sympa.
Et il y a le marché aux fleurs. Alors là, c'est
Le marché de Nice est assez grand.
c'est tous des coins où les gens vivent beaucoup dehors. Ouais.
Il fait beau.
Tout le long, là, vous avez des commerces. Et il y a beaucoup de bistrots. Là, en bas, il y a un bar. Un autre en face. Partout, ça discute.
Ah oui, bien sûr, les gens
Oh.
viennent juste pour...
C'est un marché où ça broille, ça.
Oui, oui, bien sûr.
Si on leur enlevait leur marché, vous devenez certains, je me demande ce qu'ils feraient. Hein.
Ouais.
Tous les matins.
Ça dure plus longtemps que...
C'est-à-dire plus longtemps,
Quelle est
pendant,
quelle est la peinture qui dure le plus longtemps?
pendant la période où on la travaille.
Non, c'est-à-dire la couleur, elle reste le plus longtemps avec l'acrylique ou avec l'huile?
Les fabricants d'acrylique vous disent que c'est eux qui font la meilleure.
Mais bien sûr.
Il y a moi, j'ai des
L'huile,
peintures.
c'est la plus chère, n'est-ce pas?
Oui. Ouais, je pense, il y en a qui ne donnent pas ça. Mais moi j'ai des peintures acryliques qui ont 5-30 ans.
Ça n'a pas changé de couleur?
Non, surtout si un tableau ça reste pas au soleil. Hein. Si on le mettait
À l'intérieur?
à l'intérieur, c'est totalement neuf. Et très très robuste.
Est-ce que ça aide de mettre... Ah oui, il n'y a rien pour protéger de toute façon.
Bon, à la fin, on met un vernis quand même.
Ah bon, vous mettez un vernis?
Oui. Qui peut être plus ou moins brillant. Ça, un autre qui est mat.
Parce que ma fille, elle fait des peintures, je devrais mettre ça dessus peut-être.
Oui, oui. Si vous voulez que ça fasse pas trop, prenez plutôt ça.
Quelque chose comme ça?
C'est satiné, ça donne ce
Eh ben,
résultat
je
là.
vais l'écrire comme ça, je vais lui acheter.
Ça, par exemple, je ne voulais pas avoir de brillant sur ce tableau, il est complètement
Ah,
mat.
c'est mat, oui, c'est mat.
Ouais.
Et il y a quand même une protection.
Ouais. Puis ça laisse le. Il y a des tableaux qui supportent pas ça non plus, c'est complètement mat.
Ouais,
Là, il y a un petit peu plus de brillant.
ouais, c'est vrai.
Et donc, vous prenez les deux bouteilles,
Oui.
vous chargez avec le brillant, c'est moitié-moitié, ça donne à peu près ce résultat-là. Ou celui-là plutôt.
Ah bon. Bon, ben, je vais écrire ça. Je vais la donner à l'exposition.
Oui.
C'est joli.
Ah, il fait des trucs énormes.
C'est très raffiné.
Oui, moi je le vois plutôt comme une fontaine intérieure.
Ah bon? Ah bon.
Oh,
Sympathique. Il y a un petit système de roulement de l'eau, c'est ça? Il y a une petite pompe assez.
C'était le portrait d'une dame un jour est arrivée avec une photo toute noire, très vieille.
Mhm.
C'est mon mari, si vous voulez.
Et vous lui avez fait?
Ouais.
C'est gentil.
Alors,
Mais vous lui avez donné là, ce que
ah ouais, elle me l'a acheté.
Mais alors, si vous la vendez, vous vous détachez de quelque chose?
Oui, mais j'en ai un. Il vit ailleurs, mais je suis à peu près sûr qu'il vit 3 à 4 mois par an en Afrique du Nord.
Ah oui, on dirait que c'est des Africains. Il a un bon goût des couleurs.
C'est très doux, ouais.
J'adore ces couleurs.
Ouais. J'aime tous ces coins là, vous voyez ça c'est sur papier. Ouais. Ça c'est des photos des aquarelles en question.
Alors, how are you?
He looks like an artist himself. Are you an artist?
Yes, he is writing.
Oh, you're a writer.
Écrivain.
Écrivain. He write in French.
Oh, really?
And he don't know French. He don't speak French.
Et il écrit en français quand même.
Yeah, but
Ça, c'est
il est
fort.
publié en France, en Espagne, en Belgique.
Published a lot in France. A couple of, about 200.
Oh, you translate?
A friend of mine had about 225 short stories and poems, and one book came out. Another one's supposed to come out, and it was read on the radio. So, and they got 2 prizes so far. I got another prize. Bernard, I forgot your phone number.
La cuisine française et puis après elle se transforme.
En cuisine californienne?
Ouais.
Je sais pas, il m'a fait, quand j'étais là, le filmer, un homard avec, dans une citrouille avec
Ah bon.
au moins 20 différentes sortes de petits légumes, tout ça. Mais c'était très coloré et j'avais l'impression que je regardais une peinture. C'était toutes les petites couleurs.
Ça, j'ai jamais entendu parler.
On me donne juste une demi-heure.
Ah
Mais
ouais.
elle fonctionne tous les jours, oui. La chaîne 53, c'est tous les jours.
Ah bon. Et vous passez quel jour?
Le dimanche à 10h30. Je vais vous le dimanche. Oui. Je ne regarde pas du tout la télé. Comme votre peintre là, il m'a dit qu'il n'a pas de télé. Hein?
Moi j'en ai mais je regarde pas trop. Non.
Moi non plus, je regarde juste les nouvelles.
C'est...
Je regarde CNN, ça me plaît CNN.
Ouais. Moi je suis pas le temps.
Nous avons le maire de San Francisco à Paris là en ce moment.
Ouais, j'ai vu ça l'autre jour.
Ouais, c'est sympa. Et là, ils vont construire
Il est...
l'Institut Pasteur à San Francisco. Il a rencontré Montagnier.
Ah bon.
Montagnier, celui qui a découvert
C'est pas rien.
le
ça.
sida, ouais. Le virus du sida en 84. Ils vont collaborer avec des docteurs de San Francisco. Oui, c'est une suite avec juste à côté de la Tour
Ouais, et
Eiffel.
puis tout ce qu'il faut, le Telex.
Ouais, il a tout à la disposition.
Bien sûr.
Oh, il est super sympa, il est passé sur notre chaîne, je l'ai rencontré en personne. Et on lui demande n'importe quoi, il dit oui.
Ah, il n'est pas contrariant alors.
Oui, il dit toujours oui.
L'atelier sculpture. Et ça ici, à Menlopan.
A lot of them change around. Change around.
Jackie Robert, il est parti.
There's been
Oui.
several.
Alors si vous avez besoin d'un marbre, vous pouvez aller chez lui, c'est ça?
En général, j'achète en France.
Directement du
Ouais.
fabricant.
Where did you study?
Macintosh. Et maintenant, je me suis attaqué à la couleur.
Avec le computer?
Ouais.
Vous avez un color printer?
Ouais. Ouais. Bon, ça c'est toujours. Ouais.
Mais si ça sort d'un computer, c'est considéré de l'art aussi?
Ah, il y a beaucoup de discussions en ce moment là-dessus. Ouais. Alors j'ai d'autres peintres en France, quand je leur dis ça, ils me disent ce que tu viens me raconter, on ne peut pas faire de la peinture avec un ordinateur.
Il y a votre main dessus quand même.
Oui, ça c'est totalement créé, hein. C'est pas un cliché que je prends dans la boîte, c'est dessiné.
C'est vous, oui.
Absolument, exactement comme si c'était sur un papier blanc. Ouais. Pas de... des fois, ces choses-là me servent pour faire un tableau.
Ah oui. Vous utilisez un peu le...
Voilà, par exemple ici.
Oui. Oh, lèvres, oui.
Ça, oui. Ce cliché là qui est vieux comme... je crois que c'était en 88 ça.
Ouais.
Un beau jour, j'ai fait ce tableau avec.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Alors finalement, c'est un croquis comme un autre. Sauf que...
Ici, vous l'avez fait à la main, ici avec le computer?
Ouais.
Ah.
J'ai fait ça d'abord, et puis après, ça m'a donné cette idée.
Cette peinture là, ça là, un poster de scène en Algérie comme moi, il a vu, et il s'est dit bon, ce n'est pas, mais j'ai des belles choses qui peuvent remplacer, il m'a acheté la collection.
Combien?
20 000 $, 4, il m'en a acheté 4.
Ah, 4. C'est presque 5 000 chapitres.
Collection sur les Andes,
Ah, d'accord.
ouais.
C'est bien, tant.
15 000 $, elle est partie à New York, 2 autres. Ouais. La vie c'est un théâtre, il faut en profiter. J'ai vendu un fou de Nina Simone, il venait tous les jours la regarder.
Ah bon?
Ah ouais, j'exposais dans un grand hôtel, il venait tous les jours, puis un jour il a dit bon, allez, je vais apprendre. Uniquement le blues, le jazz,
Il y a la maison de Joséphine Baker à San Francisco.
Ah ouais.
Il y a tous ces... Ray Charles. Contact, non?
Ah ouais, si vous voulez savoir passer quand. Je me suis un peu arrêté. J'ai fait du début du siècle à Miles Davis. J'ai fait une belle collection.
Bon, oui.
How are you?
My wife has
Yeah.
bought some jewelry and she's having it refitted.
Okay.
I'd like to-
What did you think about it? What did you think?
I liked it. I liked it very much.
Yeah? It's
And
not finished, huh?
I asked about a jazz club for you to go to.
Yeah.
It's called Yoshi's. Oh, you did?
On Ellis in Stockton.
Oh, okay. I used to go to a lot of jazz clubs and I use them in my writing. I use all this jazz clubs in my writing. I used to go to a lot of jazz clubs in Fillmore Street,
Yeah.
and that's what I use in my writing. And much the same way.
Oh yeah, you should go. You know the best place.
But I don't go so much in 5 o'clock and go down to the Longshoremen's Hall, go down to the docks, the different ships, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Ships. Sugar, Crockett, whatever, you know. So what should I, you gonna put a Yoshi's down? You tell them about Yoshi's, huh?
I think of the way you love through and
Oh, I like.
when I
I like the blues.
feel like it.
There's some good blues players on House
C'est
Street.
ma musique de chevet. J'écoute ça depuis 35 ans, 40 ans. Je peins. J'ai cette force de peindre le blues. Tout le monde me dit, mais pourquoi? Pourquoi les noirs? Parce que, en fait, je m'identifie peut-être un peu, certaines fois. Parce que j'ai souffert comme ils ont souffert.
Ah bon?
Voilà. J'ai souffert quand j'ai quitté l'Algérie.
Ah ouais, tout le monde.
C'était terrible.
À quel âge?
20 ans.
Moi j'ai quitté à 18 ans.
C'est beaucoup, 20 ans. Parce qu'on a tout compris à cet âge-là.
Ouais.
Mon frère, non, il n'a pas senti la même chose. Tu vois? Et ça, et depuis, j'écoute le blues. Et puis, je me suis mis à le peindre. J'en ai joué un peu, j'ai fait de la musique. J'ai joué du piano, du trombone, Je jouais dans un big band. Mais il fallait que je m'exprime.
C'est pas peinture au pinceau, c'est peinture au... comment on appelle?
Couteau.
Couteau.
Et l'expression, je l'ai eu finalement peignant. J'ai démarré en Allemagne. Je parlais pas l'allemand, rien. Il faisait froid. Je me suis mis comme ça. Regarde. Regarde un petit peu. Ce look, c'est ça que je veux. Si j'écoute pas la musique, je peux pas peindre. C'est là où la musique me donne cette force de travailler.
White.
Non,
Il a une galerie sur la rue Hayes.
je ne connais pas.
C'est un peintre noir. Il est passé sur mon programme 2 fois.
Ah ouais?
Il peint aussi des mêmes styles. Non, il a un style bien habillé.
Non, je connais pas parce que je viens d'arriver aux États-Unis, moi. Ça fait 2 mois que je suis là,
Vous
j'arrive
allez
des...
le voir, peut-être, oui.
Bah ouais, mais
Je te donne
l'adresse,
l'adresse,
ouais.
oui.
Je viens des Caraïbes, avant j'étais en Amérique du Sud, j'ai fait les Andes. Avant j'étais à Berlin. Quand le mur est tombé, je suis parti.
Bon.
Ouais, avant là j'étais en Iran, au Maroc, tu vois. Donc personne ne me connaît. Et là on va commencer.
Oui, on va vous connaître.
Bah j'espère. Bon, je suis connu un peu partout. J'ai vendu pas mal d'étoiles aux États-Unis, mais ça, c'est grand, hein. Les gens, ils vont m'acheter pas mal d'étoiles. J'en ai un peu partout dans le monde. J'en ai au Liban, j'en ai.
Vous les vendez un peu partout.
Ben, quand je fais des expos, je tombe sur des gens qui.
Et vous gardez une copie quand même.
Ah oui, j'ai des photos. J'ai des photos, j'ai des affiches, des cartes postales. Celle-là, elle est à San Francisco, elle est vendue. J'ai fait un travail sur la Tunisie aussi, j'en ai vendu. Je fais beaucoup de Médina.
Vous avez vu la Tunisie?
Je connais pas. Mais j'ai bon, mais je connais très bien l'Algérie et le Maroc. Donc c'est pas un problème.
Drop 'em all in the sea. If I got no money, she don't care. Open up the pocketbook and pay my fare. I know she good. But downtown,
Je vais le terminer après, je crois.
well, I love my baby, gonna tell everybody I know.
Et j'ai rencontré B.B. King
Ah oui?
et je lui ai montré ce que j'avais fait sur lui quand il avait 30 ans. J'ai rencontré au festival de jazz à Bayonne. Et son manager m'a invité à New York. Comment tu veux que je fasse? Je bosse pas dans l'environ. J'ai rencontré Dr. Drum, qui est un blanc. J'ai rencontré Charles Brown, Didi Bridgewater, qui connaît bien mon boulot. À chaque fois, on se voit dans les festivals, un peu partout. On discute.
Il y a-
Drop 'em all in the sea.
Peut-être que vous devrez peindre le 49er d'Ada Paris.
C'est quoi?
C'est un joueur de football.
Ah, c'est pas mon truc. Je peins pas pour gagner de l'argent, je peins par plaisir. Tu vois, si tu avais des trucs comme ça, ouais. Mais il me faut bon, moi je parle anglais, ça va, mais si j'avais un agent, ça serait encore mieux.
Ah oui?
Comme j'avais avant.
Les expositions, vous les faites au fur et à mesure que vous habitez dans un pays, non?
Ouais. Puis ça dépend si j'ai un deal à Paris, je l'envoie une caisse ou si je peux y aller, j'y vais.
Ah d'accord, d'accord. Vous connaissez Toubon? Toubon?
Qui c'est Toubon? Jacques Toubon?
Ah si, si, qui est du sud de la France.
Ah non, mais il y a Toubon, Jacques Toubon qui est au ministre, là, c'est pas lui.
Non, non, il est peintre.
Ah non, je connais pas. Non, moi je connais pas grand monde hein, chez les peintres.
Là, il y a le festival à
Voilà,
Sausalito
voilà.
des peintres.
J'ai rencontré Montmela là, qui adore ma peinture et qui m'a dit, putain, il m'a dit, j'ai jamais vu une peinture comme ça.
Non, mais si tu veux exposer, il y a... Oui.
Sausalito, j'ai exposé l'année dernière dans une
Ah, tu
galerie.
y allais? Bonsoir. We have tonight with us Chuck Siegel, and it's Camille J. Toshian who referred him to us. So Camille was an excellent guest, so I trusted this judgment in inviting his friend Chuck Siegel. So Chuck, thank you for coming tonight on our show, French American TV. I read what you sent me, so I thought you have something very good to, your message is very good, so I said go ahead, come to the show. So basically, the book that you described in the paperwork that you sent me was about the Preservationist Manifesto. That's the title of your book?
Yeah.
Is that like a political thing, or?
It is political, yeah. The basic idea of it is that traditionally we've always thought about politics in terms of progressive and conservative.
Right.
And progressive politics is in favor of modernization, which is supposed to sweep away traditional ways of doing things. And actually progressive politics started around the time of the French Revolution. It seems like people have been thinking that way forever, but at the time of the French Revolution, they first started opposing traditional forms of power, such as the church and the king and the nobility, by looking at science and modernization as a wave of the future that's going to sweep away traditional forms of power. And
what's
that made
preservation?
sense. That made sense for a couple of hundred years. But
now?
it no longer makes sense to think of traditional forms as the enemy and modernization as what's going to sweep away the status quo. We've reached the point where modernization itself is actually the status quo, where we live in a modern society.
Why is it that? Why is it the status quo? I mean, why do you think it is?
We know why. Well, we no longer live in a society like at the time of the French Revolution, where the real powers are the king, the church, the nobility.
Oh yeah, we have more
live in a-
democracy now.
Well, we live in to a large extent, the people in power, the experts, the planners, and the technologists.
Okay.
And people are not able to make a lot of decisions democratically because they let the experts make the decisions for them in technical grounds. And so, rather than looking to modernization to sweep away progress, we have to think about limiting modernization and limiting economic growth and using technology selectively, modernizing selectively. The old political distinctions don't make sense. Don't let us do that. Instead, I'm thinking in terms of preservationist versus modernist. And virtually everyone in the United States, almost all the Democrats, almost all the Republicans are modernists.
I see. And preservationist means a little bit.
Preservationist means limiting modernization, and it becomes necessary now because there's been a tremendous economic change in the course of the last century. I mean, most people don't realize how great the change is from a scarcity economy to an affluent economy. At the beginning of this century, most people lived below what we would now define as a poverty line. The great majority of people had only very basic health care, very basic education,
No car.
virtually no transportation. Walking was essentially the only form of transportation for most people.
Right.
Only the very rich, the aristocracy, owned a carriage. Even the middle class did not have a carriage. And
You want to go back to that?
No, I think at that point it made sense
Yeah.
to
Okay.
have, for socialists or liberals or leftists, to demand that the government spend more on education,
Okay. I'm on
spend more on
transportation.
health care, more on transportation, more on housing. And that has been standard leftist politics during most
Okay.
of this century.
That's true. Yeah.
But now we've reached a point where
We have enough transportation.
we have more than enough of a lot of these things. Yeah, it's enough. Sufficiency is a word that you could use for it. Or just we have enough of a lot of these things, and we have to think about how much is enough. Think about putting limits on them. And leftist, progressive politicians in America have seen that in terms of the natural environment. The environmental movement has shown that modernization and economic growth can damage the natural environment, and everybody knows that everybody realizes that we have to control growth, at least to the extent that it's necessary to preserve the biosphere, to preserve the natural environment.
What I like about what you sent me is you talked about people working to produce stuff they don't need or to buy stuff they don't need. That I liked. That is so
Yep.
true.
Yep.
Like you have mothers working to do what? To buy more stuff to clutter their house and more junk, more material stuff that they don't really need when they can just stay home and take care of their kids.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's important for people to do more for themselves. We've reached the point where consuming more no longer does us any good. and we'd be better off consuming less and having more time to do for ourselves. And one example is childcare. You know, it's 100 years ago,
We took care of the kids.
everyone, 95% of all families took care of their own children before school. And now we're so much richer, we're actually, well, in
taking care of
America,
them.
4 times as wealthy as we were 100 years ago. But people feel like they can't afford to take care of their own kids. Isn't that it?
Because they cannot keep up with the
They
Jones.
can't keep up with, well, not just keeping up with the Joneses, but for most people it's necessary to have 2 cars now. For most Americans, it's different in Europe, of course, but most people in America live in neighborhoods where you have to have a car in order to leave your house, to buy a cup of coffee or a loaf of bread, or to take the children to school.
So that's a necessity then. It's no longer a luxury or
Yep, what used to be a luxury
is
turns
now a
into a
necessity.
necessity.
Okay.
People have to work to support that standard of living. And, you know,
What came to my mind when you describe all the things that we produce that we don't need is, for example, at Christmas, people spend thousands and even millions of dollars on Christmas ornaments and Christmas things that they're going to throw away anyway, and they think it's a necessity to have it.
yeah, it's a good example. It started just in this century. And, you know, I think we just had the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade
Yeah.
just a day or 2 ago, and that started early in this century in order to start off the shopping season early. And the Christmas shopping season had to last a whole month. And now it actually started before Thanksgiving. Some people started Halloween shopping for Christmas.
So what are the things, okay, you say cars, we need them. So what are the things that we don't need?
Well, let's see, we could use a few different examples. And
Besides ornaments and stuff.
yeah, I think that everybody realizes there are some things like ornaments that people really don't need, but there are a lot of things that people consider necessities and that
You don't really need like
say
a
the same thing
toaster?
about. No, for example, I think healthcare is a very good example. If you look at the history of healthcare, you realize that 100 years ago, well, let's go back even before that. I mean, 200 years ago or 300 years ago, the average life expectancy in Europe was about 40 years.
Right. Here
People
too,
had,
right? Here in the United States
well, the
too.
United States was just being colonized, so it's,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
It was
the
better.
life expectancy was low everywhere.
Okay.
And during the 19th century, life expectancy gradually rose, slowly rose, and by the later 19th century, as people became more prosperous.
Okay.
And, you know, by the early 20th century, people had basic medical care and also had all the basics that they needed to keep themselves healthy. You know, most people had enough food to eat. There wasn't a danger of malnutrition among most Americans by the middle of the 20th century. And so, starting after a long trend of the life expectancy rising from about 40 years, reached about 70 years in 1955. But then life expectancy in the United States leveled off for 15 years, from 1955 till 1970. Life expectancy did not increase, essentially stabilized at 70 years, even though that was the time in American history when economic growth was the most rapid. You know, that was the greatest boom of the American economy, and healthcare spending was growing even more quickly. And, you know, looking back on it, people now realize that there's some things are notorious. So post-war healthcare for being in America are notorious for having been unnecessary or even destructive. And one is X-rays were routinely used as a diagnostic tool, even for children. When I was a child, they took me to the doctor and X-rayed me. And now we know that that actually is not useful diagnostically, but it does cause cancer.
Okay.
And another one, hospital births became routine in the United States in the course of the 20th century. And some European countries still predominantly use home birth.
Okay, so what
I
is
have,
superfluous about healthcare? You mentioned that healthcare is one of the things that
Here
we're
are a
spending.
few examples of things, a few things that became notorious in the 1950s. Were
Oh, yeah, the birth in the hospital.
hospital birth,
Uh-huh.
and another one was tonsillectomy.
Oh, yeah.
Children would always be taken to the hospital as soon as their tonsils became infected.
Okay.
Without any further ado about it, they immediately pulled the tonsils out.
Okay.
And studies have shown
So
that.
there's a lot of unnecessary procedures, is that what you're saying?
And studies have shown that 90% of those tonsillectomies were unnecessary.
Oh, I see. So
And
it's
that's-
just to produce extra work for the doctors?
Well, it's because people believed in technology. People believed in doing the best for their children. That meant giving them the latest technology.
Oh, okay.
And having their children born at home, taking
Was
them
not
to the
the
hospital
best.
to have their tonsils pulled out. People believed in technology, particularly in
So
post-war
people believe that
America.
if they go to the hospital, it will be better for them to have their baby at the hospital.
Yep. As it had always
Isn't
been.
it better? There's more doctors there in case of an emergency.
Well, in other countries, in the Netherlands, most births are still handled by midwives, and they have a
And
lower
everything
rate
is
of
fine?
a lower rate of infant mortality than the United States.
Oh, really?
And
That's interesting. So there's always a doctor you can call in case of emergency.
well, there have been studies showing that if prenatal examinations show that there won't be complications, it's
They
safer
won't.
to have a midwife birth.
Really?
If prenatal examination shows that there may be complications, it's safer to have a hospital birth.
Oh,
But in
okay.
most cases, midwife birth at home is
That's
safer
very
because-
good. That's very good because a lot of people leave the hospital after 24 hours if nothing's wrong, right?
Yeah, and they're pushing them through quickly now. And now we're at a funny place in healthcare where people have all of these useless treatments,
Okay.
and at the same time they're being rationed. And but anyway, studies looking at individual treatments have shown that something like a third of all treatments, medical treatments in the United States, are unnecessary. Studies by the RAND Corporation. And if we compare it with other countries, it looks like even more. If you look at the
So what about the argument that not if when people have health care then?
Well, let me just finish. If you look at the other industrialized countries,
Yeah.
the United States spends twice as much on health care as the average in industrialized countries,
Yeah.
and yet the United States has lower life expectancy than the average and higher infant mortality than the average.
And that is why? Because it's misplaced?
Yeah, we have a
Misplaced money.
healthcare system that encourages a lot of unnecessary care. So
Oh.
a lot of people who are insured and covered
Get it.
have an incentive to consume unnecessary care. You know,
Oh, really?
it's paid for. If you go to the hospital, it's paid for by your health insurance.
Like abortions? Yeah.
Well, to give one example, one really obvious example,
Yeah.
people under Medicare, that's for elderly people, are covered to have the ambulance take them to the hospital for routine examinations.
Okay. So they've
Even-
used that?
Even if they're healthy and could take a taxi cab to the hospital, that wouldn't be paid for by insurance. So actually, for the person who is covered by insurance, it's cheaper to take an ambulance to the hospital
Oh, really?
than it is to take a cab because they'd have
So
to
the
pay for the
insurance pays
cab
for it.
themselves. Yeah, the worst abuses that still exist are with Medicare because there's a very powerful senior citizens lobby. Another example is. Under Medicare, you could go to a podiatrist and have your toenails clipped by a doctor.
Instead
Medicare
of going
pays
to
for
a
it.
beauty salon?
You go to a beauty salon, you have to pay for yourself. Yep. So
Oh,
people go
okay.
to the podiatrist and have Medicare
Oh, I
pay
see.
for this unnecessary treatment. And it's roughly half.
And people
roughly
abuse
half
that?
Of all.
People use those benefits?
People abuse it, and treatments become standard. Treatments are recommended by the doctor. People are not able to make that decision, don't know enough to make the decision on their own.
What about people who have nothing? They have no health care.
Well, that's the funny thing. Think about it. That even though maybe 20 or 25% of Americans don't have enough,
Yeah.
the 75% who are covered by insurance
Have too
consume
much?
so much extra
Oh, I see.
that Americans overall consume twice as much as
Oh, okay.
West Europeans.
Okay.
So think about the waste among those people who
So it
are
should be more
covered by
evenly
insurance.
shared. I mean, the services of doctors should be more evenly shared.
Everybody, it should be more evenly shared by everybody, but it's necessary to have incentives for people not to consume wastefully, incentives for people to cut costs. And the best proposal, I think, is medical savings accounts. The idea of a medical savings account is give person catastrophic insurance. Typically it's insurance with a $2,000 deductible. And give the person $2,000 to put in a medical savings account to pay that deductible. If they don't consume that $2,000 worth of health care, then they get to keep the money in the medical savings account.
Oh, okay.
And that cuts spending dramatically. When people are thinking
That's
about
in your book?
spending, that's something in a policy study I've written and in a later book that I'm now writing. I don't think
So
I'm
what
going
do
to.
you what do you think about people who shop till they drop, like they buy clothes that they
Yeah.
don't need and stuff like that?
Happens all the time. Yep.
So you are you for people consuming all these things? If they have the money, why not?
Well, I think most of the spending that goes on in the United States is people who would rather not do it. It's like the people who would rather not have to work two incomes in order to support the suburban
family?
standard of living.
Oh, really?
They would rather work shorter hours and have time to stay home with take care of their own children.
So they are unable to make that choice?
Most Americans say that the majority have said in surveys that they would prefer to stay home and take care of their own
And
children.
why they don't do it then?
But the majority feel that they economically have to have two incomes just to get by.
Oh, it's just
And
in their
it's-
mind then?
It's not just in their mind. It's, for example, think about the health insurance. You have to buy standard health insurance. Right now, medical savings accounts are not an option.
Oh, okay.
So you have to buy health insurance that will let you spend twice as much as you really need.
Okay.
And you have to pay for that expensive health insurance if you want any health insurance at all.
Okay, I know you talk about mothers being able to take care of their kids in your book, right?
Mothers and fathers.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's the solution?
Well, there are lots of unnecessary forms of expenditure. I mean, if you compare the American economy now with the American economy in 1950, we're twice as wealthy now. But I don't know if Americans really feel better off now than they did in 1950 when they earned half as much. And I think healthcare is one very big example of wasteful spending. It's like 14% of the gross domestic product. But the biggest example is city planning. It's the way Americans build suburban neighborhoods built around freeways so that you have to own a car and there's nothing within walking distance. And that actually is required by law. There's a new movement in architecture called the New Urbanism, which is they're trying to build neighborhoods like American neighborhoods were built before World War I, when they're called streetcar suburbs.
Oh, where you can walk to the store?
You could walk to the shopping street, and there's also a trolley line, a streetcar line on the shopping street.
Oh, okay, they're trying to do that?
There are some who are trying to do it, and the main thing that prevents them from doing it is the zoning laws. It's illegal
Oh,
under zoning laws in virtually every place in the United States, illegal to build that kind of old-fashioned neighborhood, which everybody likes. There are a couple of places where they have built it. The most famous architect doing it is André
since you
Stuané.
cannot change it, writing about it, what is it going to do?
But they are changing it right now. I mean,
Oh, they
there's-
are?
The most famous architect working on it is André Stuané in
Oh, okay.
Florida.
Okay.
And partly because of his work, a couple of counties in Florida have come up with alternative zoning laws that allow you to build old-fashioned neighborhoods
Oh,
for the
okay.
first time in decades.
Oh, okay.
They have two separate sets of zoning laws. Follow the suburban zoning law or what's called traditional neighborhood design zoning law. There's an architect doing it in California too, Peter Calthorpe is the best known one doing it in California, and he's built streetcar suburbs around Sacramento, or one streetcar suburb around Sacramento, and done a master plan.
But I think you missed the point of this whole thing, because the reason why women work is men don't want to support women anymore. It's not because of modernism. I mean, this is all theory. I mean, even if a man makes 100,000, he doesn't want to have to pay for a woman. He tells her go to work, and then she has to take the kid to the health care. So all this is just theory. The truth is, the bottom line is, a lot of men don't want to have to take care of these
Well,
expenses.
what they say, anyway, I don't know, maybe there's something they won't admit, but what they say is that need two incomes to get by. And think about living someplace where the family needs at least two cars. And as your children become teenagers, each of them needs another car. It costs something like $6,000 a year just to run a car. And add on to that the extra expense of the suburban housing. It's a very,
But I
very
think
expensive.
a lot of
area.
women would, like you say, make the choice to stay home if more men were willing to support them.
Well, I think ideally I'd like to see both men and women working shorter hours.
Oh, okay. That's
And
a good idea since women are
both sharing the
educated now.
work. Yeah, both sharing the
So
work
they
and
both will have
sharing the
to take care of the
childcare.
kids then.
Yep, either one part-time.
Oh, really?
Well, I think each family should decide for themselves what they want to do, but that's what seems the best to me.
Oh, okay.
And if you think about it, the idea of the economy keeps getting more efficient, productivity keeps increasing, and as a result, people can produce things that they need in fewer and fewer hours. And since the end of World War II, Americans, until World War II, hours did decline gradually during the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. The work week declined. It was about 72 hours in the
Right.
middle of the 19th century. People worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Gradually went down, and in 1932 we got the 40-hour week, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day.
Which stays there.
And has stayed, hasn't changed since 1932.
So
It's
you want
another
to
one
see
of
more
those.
like 20 hours for the man, 20 hours for the woman. This way they can both have more time for the family.
They should work long enough to buy the things they need. And for the last 50 years, the American economy has been run on the principle that we have to stimulate economic growth.
Right.
Almost as an end to itself, but they say we have to stimulate economic growth to provide more jobs.
Right.
And that's why we built suburbs, and that's
Built
why
stuff.
we've encouraged other sorts of economic growth to provide more jobs.
Right.
But actually, as the economy becomes more efficient, there are two choices. You could either produce more, keep working the same number of hours and produce more,
Right.
or you could work shorter hours and produce the same amount or produce a little bit more. And America, without people thinking about it consciously, America has made that choice for the last 50 years of maximizing economic growth, producing as much as we can with everybody working that full-time 40-hour week,
Oh, okay.
rather than shortening the work hours. Camille might have talked about that to you when he was here. That's something he talks about a lot.
He talked about a totally
No.
different subject.
No.
He talked
Okay, well,
about
that's not that.
being a skeptic.
Aha.
So let's go back to the book. So the Preservationist Manifesto. This is the manifesto inside?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Whether
you
it's
give,
actually a manifesto, I'm not sure. But
okay, well, basically you give your main ideas in there on how
Uh-huh.
to remedy to the ills that you see now.
yeah, I think I show why economic growth is no longer working,
Okay.
and why it's necessary for people to do more for themselves rather than consuming more,
Okay.
because we've reached the point where we consume enough.
But they think that they're doing something for
Increase
themselves by consuming.
No, I think
they're
they
missing
usually,
the point, huh?
I think they usually feel like they have to, like
They
they have
have
no
to?
choice but to own 2 cars, no choice but to get health insurance.
Okay.
And
How about the number of kids that families should have? Do you talk about that, or does it make a difference?
well, population growth is leveling off in the United States.
Right.
It's expected to level off soon, and
It's zero now. It's zero population growth, isn't it?
the fertility rate is just about at 0, and then
Right.
it takes time for the population growth to catch up. Once the fertility rate reaches 0, it's 0 in a few countries in Europe,
Oh, I see.
and yet the problems of growth keep going on even when there's no population growth. In American cities where population has stopped growing, Chicago, population hasn't grown for decades, and yet the area of the city
It's keep growing?
keeps growing, twice as big.
Really?
Cleveland, Chicago, yeah, everybody moves out of the old neighborhoods and out of the city
Oh, I didn't know that.
to suburbs, even
That's
without the
interesting.
population
Same
growth.
population.
Yeah, in a few cities. Cleveland is the most notable. They're actually losing population,
Wow.
but the city's getting bigger and
Well,
bigger.
you have 1 minute to give us maybe a summary of your manifesto. That's your last minute and last chance to make your point.
Now, I've probably summarized it as much as I can, but simply it's a matter of saying that growth has gone far enough, and
Okay.
everybody knows that growth is damaging the natural environment,
Okay.
but people think that we need it to help people, and it's a matter of people's needs versus the natural environment. But we have to realize that we've reached the point where growth is no longer helping people either.
Okay. So, okay. Well, if presidents follow your ideas, they wouldn't get reelected. They need growth to get reelected, right?
Well, I'm not sure. Let's see if anybody ever
Challenge it.
comes up with these ideas. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I enjoyed. Maybe you can send a copy of this to the president.
Oh, what do you want? Go to the president?
Yeah, if you think it's a good idea.
Well, a senator asked for a copy.
Oh, yeah?
Bill Bradley, Senator Bradley, but he retired from the Senate. I don't think it was a result of reading
No, you
this
can
book
give it
that
as
he
a
retired.
present, and don't wait for them to ask you. They might have an idea or two they might pick up from you.
No, I'll give it as a present to you.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. So this is Chuck Siegel, the Preservationist Manifesto, written by him this year, right? Did you write it?
It was published in May.
In May,
this
okay.
year.
So
Yeah.
congratulations. This is one of your many books, right?
It's my first book on politics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, congratulations.
No
So
problem.
thank you very much for being on French American TV. The subject
Okay.
was interesting, and I thank you again for
Thank
being
you.
here.
It was my pleasure.
Okay. Ok, bonsoir. Nous avons ce soir avec nous quelqu'un qui est bilingue, James Trockmey. Je pense que tu es américain, c'est ça?
Je suis américain,
Voilà.
c'est le cas, mais j'ai vécu 22 ans en France. En fait, je suis né, j'ai été élevé en France. Donc,
Ah d'accord, donc tu es
d'où
plutôt
le-
français. Hein?
d'où l'aspect biculturel.
Ah d'accord. Et donc on va faire l'interview en français, étant donné qu'il parle très bien français. Donc 22 ans à partir de quel âge?
Ah ben, je suis né en France.
Ah, tu es né en
oui,
France.
oui,
Ah, d'accord.
j'ai quitté la France.